It's on? Okay. Okay, should we get started? Whoa, that was me. Bismillah, walhamdulillah, wassalatu wassalam ala rasulillah, wa ala alihi wa sahbihi wa barak wa sallam. Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullah. So we're going to jump right back into this text that we've been reading. Essentially, it's a collated, collated set of the hadith that speak about al-Isra wal Mi'raj, the night journey and ascension of the Prophet ﷺ. So we're at this juncture in our discussion on the Meccan period of the Seerah, that we're getting close to the end of that Meccan period. That's a 13-year period. I think we've been meeting now for like more than a year on this, right? Inshallah, we'll aim to kind of get through the Meccan period soon and then start the Medinese period. The Prophet makes hijrah from Mecca to Medina. But the framing that we've been looking at this in essentially is through a prism founded on the verse of the Quran, فَإِنَّ مَعَ الْأُسْرِ يُسْرًا إِنَّ مَعَ الْأُسْرِ يُسْرًا. That indeed with hardship there's ease, indeed with hardship there's ease. That the Prophet had not only sustained prior to this severe oppression in the city of Taif that we discussed, that he goes thinking he'll be welcomed in, he's met with abuse, stones are hurled at him again and again. He is dealing with this also in the aftermath of the passing of his wife Khadija radiallahu ta'ala anha, the passing of his uncle Abu Talib. They sustained a severe boycott prior to that, that contributed to a lot of the challenges that were experienced, as the Prophet at this juncture is now 52 years of age, right? And Khadija radiallahu ta'ala anha, we said, is how much older than the Prophet? 15 years, right? So he's 25, she's 40 when they get married. So she's in her 60s experiencing this boycott. It's very severe, bears impact on her physically, on her health. And they go through, prior to that, a decade of deep persecution and challenge and tribulation. Al-Isra wal Mi'raj is something that is a response to those difficulties, and seeing that as an opportunity for healing, an opportunity for the Prophet to be replenished. We talked about it from the standpoint of the Prophet having knowledge acquisition, that the angel Jibreel is teaching him still throughout this journey. Like, do you know where you just prayed? Do you know who this person was? Do you know what this is? And when he replies in the negative that he does not know, he's then taught, right? And at 52 years, he's still learning stuff, and he's the messenger of God, but giving a sense of how this relates to healing and the aftermath of difficulty. Like, contentment comes from knowing in our tradition. It doesn't come from not knowing. And having answers through knowledge acquisition is not just about kind of empirical based evidences for things and questions of how and what, but being able to answer questions of why, and to elicit wakefulness inwardly, but also illumination inwardly in this prism of contentment that's harnessed through knowledge acquisition. He meets like the other prophets of God. They pray together. We talked about this, I think, some weeks ago. And last week, I think we spent a lot of time just talking out the instance of where he's offered the wine and the milk to drink when he's thirsty, and how he's choosing between two permissible things, but one, even though it's permissible, can still yield like consequences, and how that kind of manifests in not just his immediate, but generationally thereafter, right? If we get people to move in, maybe we can make some room so that if people are coming in to pray, they have like a clear pathway to pray. If that's okay. Does anybody remember any of the stuff I'm talking about? You do? No? You're not paying attention? Great. So we're going to try to read through a bunch of the text right now, just so we can kind of get going through this. And one of the reasons why we're spending so much on this is because there's so much that you can actually extrapolate from this. And we're reading a text that was compiled by Sayyid Muhammad Alawi al-Maliki al-Hassani, that essentially collates these hadith of al-Isra wal-Miraj. And one of the things that we said in the beginning was that there might be some discrepancies in terms of like the chronological order of some of these things. But you want to spend some time with it, right? A lot of people would consider the month of Rajab that we're in to be the month that Al-Isra wal Miraj takes place. They engage in practice, different opinions on different things, which is important to understand, right? Like in our tradition, our religion never had a problem with different opinions. It was very unique in comparison to other religious traditions in that you essentially have, post the time of the Prophet ﷺ, the establishment of hundreds of legal schools of thought, right? What we call a madhab. People know this word, madhab, right? It's a legal school of thought. There's theological schools of thought. Like people are interpreting texts. We have within Sunni Islam the sustainability of four of these madhabs: the Hanafi school, the Shafi school, the Maliki school, the Hanbali school. And they're rooted in hundreds of schools of thought that existed at one time. And how we land on these four, we can go into like discussion on that if people are actually interested in it. But thinking about it, even within the prism of Sunni Islam, how there's a sense that these diverse schools still all constitute orthodoxy, right? Not orthodoxy the way that you can look at other religious traditions that create kind of gradations in terms of religious practice, but they're saying like all of these schools have a basis to them. Do you see? It's more of a modern phenomenon that exists, that people just need black and white answers and the answer and only one answer and like the most correct answer. This was never a challenge in our religious tradition from its onset. If anything, it enriched and allowed for there to be a recognition that there was great respect, right? Imam Ahmad ibn Hanbal, for example, he is the namesake and founder of the Hanbali school. And in his opinion, if you have like a nosebleed, your wudu breaks. You got to redo your wudu. Make sense? His students ask him, like, what if we're praying behind somebody whose nose bleeds and they don't redo their wudu? Imam Ahmad says to them, like, it's a good question that you ask. He said, but how could I not pray behind the likes of Imam Malik or Sayyid ibn Musayyib, rahimahullah, who they were of the opinion that the nosebleed does not break your wudu? But they didn't have these challenges. Do you get what I mean? And to have a reductive understanding of religion that gets us to a place that it creates agitation, that I not only need to have an answer always, but I also have to have the answer, like the only answer. There are particulars in our tradition that have absolute answers, like God is one. That's not a debatable in Islam. Somebody tells you there's no God and they're Muslim, you don't have to be mean to them, but you feel like, that's not Islam. Do you know, right? How can you be atheist and be Muslim? It doesn't match up. If somebody says, I think there's more than one God, there's 2, there's 5, there's 12, this is also not Islam, right? There's certain things. We got 5 daily prayers. We got a Qibla. We face towards Mecca. Do you know? But there's a lot of stuff that has different opinions on it. And to get to a place where it creates a conundrum is more of a modern phenomenon than anything. And when you get to a pedagogy that says to you, this is the interpretation, this is the answer to something, it's a sign of spiritual immaturity to believe that I know every opinion on every matter whatsoever. And even then, when you have an understanding of what the opinion is, our sense is like you make excuses for things as to why somebody might be practicing in the way that they may be practicing within reason. Do you get what I mean? And so you don't want to like take Al-Isra wal Miraj as something that's a seasonal experience that is engaged in only in terms of the outward, that's passed on in traditions and customs and practices, that doesn't allow for you to extrapolate fully from what the overall lessons and meanings are from this, that roots contentment in our tradition with taking what you know and acting on what you know and keeping these things close together. And there's like rich, vivid descriptions of so much stuff. There's a reason why Allah took the Prophet ﷺ from Mecca to Jerusalem into the heavens and brought him down. It wasn't so that we didn't know this stuff and learn from it, right? But it was for whose benefit? Like our benefit more than anybody else. The Prophet is already Masum. Like he's going to heaven, right? May Allah make us his companion in Jannah. So the idea from it is to like delve in and read and reflect and contemplate. There's a reason why we're spending a lot of time on this is because there's a lot of stuff here that's more than just, hey, he went from here to there and then up there and back here. Do you know? It's got like a little bit more that at this juncture, you tap into the faculties that God has endowed you with, and you sit down and you talk and you discuss, and then you think and you reflect, and you say, my reflection is not in a vacuum, but it's about how is it relevant to me? Like, how does this apply back to me? And we landed in a place where he essentially is brought in to the first level, and then we'll go from there. Okay, bismillah. So he says, the gate was opened. When they came in, they saw Adam, peace be upon him, the father of humanity, as he was on the day Allah created him in his complete form. The spirits of the prophets and of his believing offsprings were being shown to him, whereupon he would say, a goodly spirit and a goodly soul, put it in the highest, the Iliyin. Then the spirits of his unbelieving offspring would be shown to him, and he would say, a foul spirit and a foul soul, put it in the lowest level, the Sijjin. The prophet saw to Adam's right great dark masses and a gate exuding a fragrant smell, and to his left great dark masses and a gate exuding a foul, malodorant smell. Whenever Adam looked to his right, he would smile and be happy, and whenever he looked to his left, he would be sad and weep. The prophet greeted him, and Adam returned his greeting and said, welcome to the righteous son and the righteous prophet. The prophet said, what is this, O Jibreel? He replied, this is your father, Adam, and the dark throngs are the souls of his children. Those on the right are the people of paradise, and those on the left are the people of the fire. Whenever he looks to his right, he smiles and is glad, and whenever he looks to his left, he is sad and weeps. The door to his right is the gate of Jannah. Whenever he sees those of his offspring enter it, he smiles happily. The door to his left is the gate of Jahannam. Whenever he sees those of his offspring enter it, he weeps sadly. Ashami adds, then the prophet continued for a little while. He saw a table spread of which there were pieces of good meat, which no one approached, and another table spread of which pieces of rotten meat, which stank, surrounded by people who were eating it. The prophet asked, O Jibreel, who are these? And he replied, these are those of your community who abandon what is lawful and go to what is unlawful. We'll talk about some of these things in like the coming paragraphs. But in looking at these initial three now, where he's being introduced to Adam alayhi salam, who in our tradition, like we believe in an Adamic narrative of creation, right? Adam, peace be upon him, is the first human created. We don't have concepts that parallel everything in the Judeo-Christian narrative. There's no concept of original sin within our religion. And this part to this narrative gives us some of this insight because Adam is the father of all of humanity, and he's got kids, offspring, progeny that go in different directions. Everybody is not exactly the same as their predecessor. And built into our religion is this notion that you can be the child of someone and you could be totally different from that. It's not just by virtue of the fact that my son, being my son, is going to be like me, or that I am going to be a carbon copy of what he will eventually become. We might look like each other, the poor guy, right? He'll like tap my belly and be like, "It's so jiggly, Baba." Or you'll say like, "You don't have so much hair, Baba." I'm like, "Hey man, you know what you're gonna look like in 40 years? It's what you're looking at right now." Do you know? Or my mom is even better. Like when she sees me with my kufi off, she'll be like, "Why are you doing that?" And I'm like, "Why am I doing what?" And she's like, "Why? Like, why don't your hair is falling out?" I'm like, "I'm not doing it. It's not like an active thing that I'm doing." And she's like, "You should stop it." And I'm like, "What? What are you saying?" And I'm like, "First of all, it's not. It's your fault. It's your genes that I have, right? It's not my fault." Do you know what I mean? But in understanding this, Adam alayhi salam is still individually separate from those who come after. And those who come after are still going to be on their respective trajectories. An accountability recognition that is highlighted here in Al-Isra wal Miraj, that amongst the things that exist in creation is also the creation that is Jannah and the creation that is Jahannam. May Allah protect us from his wrath and make us from amongst those who are granted his mercy. They can't do anything to you other than what Allah allows for them to do. So you're not supposed to be a population that lives simply in pursuit of a paradise or in avoidance of a hell, because they're still amongst the creation of the divine. But living devoid of a reality that an afterlife exists, as well as a recognition that the accountability variable is not anybody else that's going to be taken into account for your actions. We don't have these concepts that somebody else died for our sins, or we bear the burden of somebody else's sins. We individually are the ones who have accountability for what we do. Adam, who was before any other human, is seeing every other human where they're at, and he has this still happiness and sadness that's evoked on a human level. But the individuals are going to have individual accounting. Do you see? It's important to understand because even in an Adamic narrative of creation, right from the onset, we see how difficult like family can be. And it's visualized in every prophet's story. But starting from Adam, he's got two sons. One of them kills the other. Extremely distinct from the generation that comes before. You don't want to be a population that believes that somehow a generation that comes after you is meant to just be continuity of you as a person. They're continuity of your lineage, but they're fully autonomous humans and individuals. And if you picture and imagine what it means to have accountability of choices and decisions that are not just like the color of my jacket or the color of my shirt or like how it is that I trim my facial hair or whatever else. But perspective is also a choice, which then elicits responses at the level of like how I dress and what I eat and why I do the things that I do. Our religion seeks to instill within us a theology that informs those decisions. And here now, when we have this frame that the prophet chose the milk over the wine, and everything goes back to just choices here, it is embedded in this, like, well, why? What's the relevance of it? The choices are where the accountability lies. So you could do it however you want to. You're just going to have to explain to God, why did you do it that way? And the explanation is not just about what I did or did not do, but what I had the ability to do and still did not do it in those ways. The son can be different from the father, right? And by extension, the mother, daughter, like whatever ways you want to identify those things, that's not a bad thing. It's also not a good thing, but it has to be a thing that's recognized and realized. You don't get to benefit simply because of the good works that someone else did in terms of accountability. There is a notion in our tradition that we do good things so that the ones who come after us will have benefit, right? The story of Musa alayhi salam and Khidr alayhi salam, if you know the story of Moses and Khidr, that Musa alayhi salam is given direction towards Khidr when he's made aware that Khidr has different knowledge than he does. And not to go into too much detail, but in one of the instances of their interactions, Khidr is rebuilding a wall in a town where people were unhospitable to them. And when Musa asks him as to why, he says, like, well, this is where we stop our interactions, because he keeps asking him, like, why are you doing what you're doing? And he was told, don't ask. So here he gives the explanation that at the base of this crumbling wall was wealth that righteous people had left behind for their children. And if he doesn't rebuild it, those unhospitable townspeople will come and they'll find that wealth and usurp it from these kids. But the idea was that Allah was sending Khidr to protect these kids because of their parents being good. Sayyid ibn Musayyib, rahimahullah, who we just mentioned 10 minutes ago, right, is a great scholar of our tradition. He would tell his children, I do good things so that you will benefit, right? It has a carryover effect in that sense, but they still have accountability individually. And the goodness and righteousness of your friend is not going to be what it is that you have accountability on the day of judgment. You have accountability for yourself. And the Prophet is seeing this firsthand, and he's asking the angel Jibrail, like, who is this and what is this? And he's telling him straight up, these are the people who are going to this way, and these are the people going that way. May Allah make us people of Jannah. The secularity that we get exposed to in the prism of modernity is a secularity that has us believe in what exactly? That this world is simply all that there is. And you got to think within yourself, like choices that you're choosing right now on this day itself, this week itself, that also corresponds with what I was saying before. If you trivialize religion to this place where you are uncomfortable with diverse opinions, you don't know how to tolerate like the breadth and depth of this religion and what it is that it actually offers to us in terms of empowerment and strength and so much dignity from its practice, not just of ritual, but its practice of belief and conviction. There's no other opportunity to like do. You only do here. When you stand there, you are accounted for what you got done or did not get done. And then the things that are cliche end up being very real. Like time is not something you get back. You just gotta like get it done when you can get it done. So what are you waiting for? Like, why are you waiting? And answering it not rhetorically or asking rather rhetorically, but actually answering it. When the Prophet sees this, he's going to still go back. If you come to the hadith class that we do on Mondays, he's still talking to them like in Medina after he sees this about treating people well and good character and ethics and like values, right? Why? Because that's what's going to really make or break some of this stuff. And if that prayer is making a difference, it's going to be transformational of your inward self. And it should be yielding for you, consequently, that you're not treating people like garbage. You're treating people well. You're treating people nicely. Do you get what I mean? So let's do this because more people have trickled in. You turn the person next to you. What do you think makes it hard to remember a hereafter in the here that we're living? Like when I'm walking through the streets, I'm choosing my choices. Like, what is it that's influencing why I do what I do? And how do I get it to align to the reality? That doesn't need me to believe it, man. You don't have to believe it for it to be true, but it's your benefit to believe it, not at a surface level, but in a way that fundamentally informs practice. How do I get myself to be in a place where, like, what do you think the Prophet is telling his companions when he gets back to Mecca and he's in Medina? It's not like, hey guys, you know what? It's all good. Like, don't stress this. He loves them. And his love for them is not going to be in this kind of like weird way that uses like unusual language to convey principles that are more about self-accountability. I'm only telling you this so that God doesn't hold me into account. There's no love in that statement. I'm just telling you so that I don't get in trouble, so that when Allah asked me, I said, I told him he was doing haram. The Prophet's telling them with a sense of like love for them, right? He loves them. He wants them to be in Jannah also, and walks with them still through their struggles as they're making mistakes and slipping up, but still within the parameters of a broader objective that says, this is temporary, this is forever. Like, how are you planning for the forever? And why is the temporary in a contrary proportion to what is going to exist eternally in terms of the decisions you're making? Like, you're putting so much effort into getting what is going to be seconds of dunya at the cost of what? Do you see? But the goal is for belief to inform behavior. I can understand the hadith. I can realize and know that as a historical occurrence it takes place, but I want it to now translate into impacting my actions. How do I start to get that done? How do I bring the presence of the akhirah more into my decisions here in the dunya? Does the question make sense? So we can turn the persons next to us. What's getting in the way of this thing for me individually? If you haven't been here before, don't only talk if you feel like you're saying the most correct thing. Definitely don't talk to tell somebody else that what they're saying is ridiculous. Like, listen. And don't hesitate from speaking because you're worried about saying what's wrong. You want to get to a place where you can express so that the ideas start to become more concrete, because you can't believe something because somebody else believes it. Belief is subjective. It has to exist within. We asked last night, I wasn't here. Was anybody here at Dr. Murmur's class last night? Yeah. Did that brother come and take his shahada after? He did? Yeah, right? Somebody took their shahada yesterday. Somebody took their shahada today. 2 people are coming on Friday. Right? May Allah grant them ease. Do you know? What are they buying into, man? They're buying into the theology. They're buying into the belief. Do you see? And we want them to come into a community that is also made up of people who are strengthened through their belief, right? May Allah make us strong believers who found strength through our belief. How? How do I do that? Do you understand? Like, and everything in the day is trying to compete against this. It's trying to get you to believe that this world is all that there is. That's it. Our Prophet is constantly telling his people, let them have this dunya, man. We're going to live for something bigger. And if you start to be bold enough to live for something bigger, it's not going to make you crumble the things that make you crumble, guaranteed, you know? So let's turn to the person next to us and talk about it a little bit. What's getting in the way, and how do I align my intentionality and my worldview to incorporate this? And maybe a third thing, like, what's the benefit of it, right? Like, if I start thinking more with an akhirah-driven mindset, how does that yield for me something that then incentivizes the acquisition of the mindset with more regularity? Do you see what I mean? So I'm not throwing my back against the wall in defense, but I can really feel strength through it, right? Like, what's the benefit of a belief in this afterlife? Do you see? Let's talk about it for a few minutes, then we'll come back and discuss. If you don't know the names of the person next to you, just exchange names, and then we'll come back and talk about it. Go ahead. Okay, so what are we talking about? Maybe we can have a few people discuss with us. Are people comfortable the way they're seated right now? It just seems like such a big clump of. Are you comfy? Is everyone comfy? Yeah? We are comfy? I feel very bad. I'm sitting on this chair and everybody's sitting the way that they're sitting. What do we discuss? Like what gets in the way of this, and how do we start to align ourselves, and what's like the benefit of it even to begin with? What do we talk about? Maybe we get a few people. Yeah.
I think for me, what was most top of mind is just my nuts. And that's something that I'm like really actively working on, like tuning in when it's just like something more specifically like my ego. And that comes up a lot, or I think that the best example is you work when you work a corporate job and you're on a call with like people under 15. Uh, we're just jumping down each other's throats and asking hard questions to each other for no reason. Just kind of driving like my department's only this and my department's only this and look for the outcome. It's really short sighted, and I think I've really actively been trying to remember like okay, there's a day of judgment for all things, and like this is so stupid. Like do you need like does your ego need to boost because mine doesn't? I'm gonna go pray, and I just like I started to tap out of those calls a little bit, and then also I think just like competition and maybe goes with nuts as well, but for me it's like those two things. Yeah.
Great. I mean, not great, but you know, right? What else? You're gonna say something?
Yeah, we talked about the benefit of having a clear mindset in this plane. One of those benefits are practicing non-attachment to the material world and material things, but also living in the ways that we choose to live it means harm reduction for ourselves and for the people around us as well. So if we all were practicing this theology, we wouldn't have any systems of oppression like the prison industrial complex or food waste or any of these systems of oppression that exist. So the benefit is again non-attachment, but also just a world that we would want to exist in, and this world that we do exist in.
Yeah, 100%. Somebody had their hand raised there. Yeah.
And I had a bar over here about intellectual obesity and how we're like constantly like overloaded with things. I was talking about how I like know that I'm like not being intentional and I'm too busy and I'm like bombarding myself. When I start, my hands start to get cut, like as I'm doing things, or I'll like injure my hand, and it's like it's an indication to me that I need to like slow down and be more intentional. But that always happens when I just start like overloading myself with like information and tasks, and I'm trying to like do all the things, right? And not having my like moments of seclusion, right? My moments of like quiet where I like don't have a phone and not around people. Yeah, that's when I think when I'm less intentional, right? When I'm just overloaded, and capitalism, that definitely drives.
And capital. Great. Wow, that. Yeah, go ahead, man.
To the first part, we were discussing like sometimes the environment has you focus on like immediate needs and stressors. So we're constantly thinking about paying the bills and food on the table. And the constant stressors that come up that have you focused on the right here, right now, and blurs your vision to see beyond what's going on in this moment.
Yeah, right. And all these things are harder when it's not that you're practicing theology, but you're only practicing ritual. Do you know? Like our tradition likens a prayer without an inner element to a body that has no soul. It's just a corpse. It's not going to give you life if it's rendered lifeless, and life is not present because of what's happening outwardly. It's about what's happening inwardly. Do you see what I mean? When you start to actually ponder and reflect, even in the frame of this, do you know? Yeah, like you put in your effort, you utilize the means, but Allah is the one that's providing for me. My boss is not my provider. I'm not the provider of my children, right? Like the IC does not feed you, Allah feeds you. Do you know? And understanding that at a level that then gets illustrated through hadith and Quran that we reflect upon. What does it mean when the Prophet says, like, be like the birds who leave from their nests with their empty stomachs and they come back full? You know, like, what's he trying to evoke? It's not self-deprecation, that in exhaustion and tiredness and no moments of stillness, you just hate on yourself and hate on yourself and hate on yourself. Even the birds like trust in God more than I do. No, that's not why the Prophet said that. It wasn't so that you would engage in this comparative mode that is unhealthy. It's so that you would have an illustrated opportunity to be able to then just pause and reflect and say, like, how are they getting fed, these birds? Right? They got little babies that are chirping. I don't know if you know how hard it is to be an animal in the wild. Do you know? You could be going to go get some worms for your baby birds, and then some animal comes and like eats your babies when you're gone. Like, this is like a thing that happens, right? It's not false. It happens. But they're still moving to go get what they get done because the base of it is not a trust in the dollar that's paying the bill. The base of it is a trust in the one that is their ultimate provider of provision. Do you know? It doesn't render indifference. If the theology is sound, if the iman is sound, it's going to get you up and get moving, not have you sit down and say, well, God is my provider. Somehow like an angel is going to come and bring me a basket full of food. Do you know? But the belief gives you kind of motivation to get going. Do you see what I mean? What gets in the way? And how do I align myself back to this fundamental that so much keeps going back to? Man kana yu'minu billahi wal yawm al-akhir. Man kana yu'minu billahi wal yawm al-akhir. And I got to start to think about, well, If I'm not believing in it, I'm believing in something. What am I actually fundamentally believing in? And how did I get to that part? And so much of it is through a socialization that is purposeful within systems of whiteness that get you to loathe yourself and they get you to think poorly of others in ways that eradicate opportunity of finding strength and empowerment through what our religion offers. And I don't say it to sound like a soundbite, but to say it to really think, like, do you believe your Islam is a liability or an asset? And the world makes most of us believe our Islam is a liability. And the paradigm shift has to come inwardly that says, like, why do I think of my religion in this way? It is an asset. And I want to feel that like taste that comes from actual belief in something. Do you know? Because then it just hits me harder. Trying to make sense of a world that is nonsensical makes no sense if there's no concept of a day of judgment and an afterlife. No sense if there's not a day that's not just about individual accountability, but a day where every question of why gets answered. And Allah, in ultimate justice, brings balance to everything. You see? Gotta like read about what this is, not just through your own pondering, but actually like read and reflect and contemplate. Bring some stillness, be around people who are driven by principles and ideals and values that you aspire towards. And all of us have areas that we can improve upon. But the world suffocates us to have us believe that our goodness is rooted in the acquisition fundamentally of what? And so here, how could the Prophet go on Al-Isra wal-Mi'raj and there not be something that indicates the importance of what fundamentally makes us Muslim, a belief in God and a belief in an afterlife that is predicated on our standing in front of God? I say it because I love you. I don't know like what everybody's doing throughout the course of their day, just like you don't know what I'm doing when I'm not in this space. But I know a lot of us, we don't get brought up with an Islam that's rooted in theology. We get brought up with an Islam that's rooted in practice. And if you're given the outward without the inward, the outward can be performed. We could all right now get up and just bow and kneel and prostrate, but the heart has to be attached through what the actual exercise prescribes as the heart's capacity to be attached through. That's like a theology that is rooted in what Allah is telling us. The mechanisms here of accountability are not about a moral relativism also. It doesn't not matter what you think, but you are not the determiner of right and wrong and good and bad. Allah is the determiner of right and wrong and good and bad. Look at what happens when humans decide what is good and bad. What do they build? Racist, bigoted systems. That's what it is. No love. Greed, selfishness, the centering in an unhealthy way of the self. That's what self-centeredness is. I am at the center always. Me, 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 me. You don't want to buy into that mindset that seeks validation from those who created systems to make you hate yourself to begin with. You believe in a God that loves you more than anything. And you know that this is true, right? Right? Hatu burhanakum, like bring your evidences. Allah is al-wadud, like he is the source of love. This is what he tells us about himself. So God loves us not because of who we are, but because of who he is. And the base of it is where these people who came last night, today, they're coming the rest of this week, They're going to say the Shahada. Some of you took your Shahada here. Some of you watch people in this room take their Shahada. This is what you are witnessing when you say this. I bear witness that there's nothing else worthy of my worship except Allah. And then everything that comes along with that. You can believe God created you. That doesn't just by extension assume also that you will stand in front of that God one day. You can believe that God made you. That doesn't then assume also a belief that that God is the most wise of those who have wisdom, the source of all knowledge. The bar to Islam's entry is not here, it's down here purposefully, but it gets to a place where you got to pick up the book and read it. And if you don't, some of it is not just an innately driven theology that you can just deduce. How can you just on your own get up one day and say, I think there's two angels on my shoulders writing stuff down? Right? It doesn't, how? And that absence of moral relativism in a God-centered religion is going to assume there's certain things that God asked me to do that I love to do, certain things I struggle with, certain things I don't fundamentally understand why. I don't know why we prayed 3 rak'ahs at Maghrib and 4 at Isha. I don't know. Anybody who tells you that they don't know. How do you know why we do that many? How? I do know that it's a time-tested, divinely mandated exercise, and the one who knows me better than I know myself is the one who gifted it to me, so that I do have moments of reprieve multiple times a day that enable me to replenish and reflect through the oasis that is my salah. But I'm not going to know why we do 3 at Maghrib or 4 at Isha. I don't know why. And as I go and I move forward, that's why like knowledge is a source of contentment. And it's not just what I know and did not know, but I had the ability to know and I still didn't do that. And before we even get to that point, just think inwardly, man. How much stuff do you know that you don't act upon? Like you know it. Why are you acting contrary to it? You know, like lying is bad. You know, gossiping is bad. You know, racism is bad. You know, charity is good. You know, volunteerism is good. You know, kindness is good. Oppression, bad. Inequity, bad. In any form. Where there's imbalances of power, there's always room to justify why it's okay for me to engage in an oppressive act towards somebody that doesn't have the same level of power as I do. A father to a son, a mother to a daughter, or any combination thereof, an employer to an employee. Like people engage in all kinds of justifications that are not rooted in our religious tradition. You will be accountable for every single thing. So you could do it however you want to. You're just going to have to explain why it was done that way. You see? And so you spend some time in reflection, right? What does the akhirah mean to me? What does it mean? Like to have eternal existence. Do you know? What does that mean? What does it mean to live in a place where there's no busyness? What does it mean? What does it mean to be in a Jannah where there's no futility? There's no arguing. There's no fighting. What does that mean? What does it mean to be in a place that's so pure? There's just peace, like tranquility at all times. And it's never just novel that you get over it, but every single moment is just again and again and again the experience. Why would you want some part of this if it means giving up all of that? And what is it that you're being asked to do? Just like real simple things. As we go through this, these are like what some of these descriptions are. And the Prophet continued for a little while. He saw a table spread on which there were pieces of good meat which no one approached, and another table spread on which were pieces of rotten meat which stank, surrounded by people who were eating it. The Prophet asked, O Jibrail, who are these? He replied, these are those of your community who abandon what is lawful and go to what is unlawful. They're choosing like what they're choosing. Why are they attracted towards what is rotten versus what is not? Why does my heart go towards like what it goes towards? Why am I attracted towards certain things and not towards other things? The juxtaposition of the permissible to the impermissible can't be through a mode that we learn about some of these items, but understanding it at the phase of existence that I'm in right now, there is so much more that's permitted than rather what is unpermitted. There's always an option or an alternative to what is impermitted. But what brings me to a place of the permissible versus the impermissible or vice versa? A lot of people turn to haram not because they're bad people, but because there's an absence of communal supports. And when we talk about this rooted in a day of judgment, may Allah grant us ease on that day, individual obligations alone are not just what there's accountability for, but also communal obligations. The establishment not just of masjids that are multi-million dollars with chandeliers that cost enough money that we could feed most migrants for the entire month of Ramadan if that money was channeled in those ways. But in being able to understand and recognize, like rooted in the conversations of what we're having, the building out of like clinics and pantries, as well as like somebody who's struggling with alcohol. The Prophet had companions who struggled with drinking. There's hadith where they laugh together. The Prophet has a companion by the name of Abdullah, who there's hadith where they laugh together. And there's other hadith where he takes the had punishment because he drinks. When they speak poorly of him, the Prophet says, don't say such things. He loves God and his messenger. Don't say such things. Don't assist shaitan in victory over your brother. What are we going to do, man? In New York City, there's 1 million of us. You know that? There's 1 million of us. Our community has to be the community that builds the reentry programs for our sisters and brothers coming out of the prison system. I've sat in Washington Square Park. I've walked through those places. There's people who offer me all kinds of things to smoke. Do you know? One of these guys is somebody who I said, man, why are you doing this? And he said, Imam, I don't know how to do anything else. Nobody's hiring me. I came out of that prison, but I still got kids I got to feed. What am I going to do? Abdullah ibn Amr ibn al-As, who is the son of Amr ibn al-As, is a companion of the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam, who was appointed a governor to be governor towards the end of his life. He's seen like in tears by his son. And his son thinks that maybe my father is being taken by the angels of death. And when he asks him, like, what are the tears about? He says, my life is divided into 3 phases. There was a time when I was the worst enemy of the messenger of God, right? In this Seerah class, when we talked about them going to Abyssinia, do you remember? Amr ibn al-As was one of the people that tried extensively to bring them back to Mecca so that he can make life hell for them. This is the mindset of an abuser. You chase down your victim to whatever extent possible. He said the second phase is when I bore witness and testified that there's nothing worthy of worship except Allah and that Muhammad is the messenger of God. And he said, had I died in that state, perhaps there would be hope for me. And he said, the third phase now is where I'm at. And he's a governor. And he said, all of these people, they're going to have ability to stand on the day of judgment and tell Allah that I did not honor their rights. a communal responsibility. What are we going to do, man, when that guy in that park, who most people aren't saying, like, let me sit next to him on a subway train, let me like pray next to him, is going to say, those Muslims, they didn't build like the opportunity for me. That guy that struggles with substance, who had to turn to it because people can be terrible, they didn't build a rehab facility for me. Do you get what I mean? That's why, like, your fajr is not just for you. When you can bring into it an intention that it's for all of us, and you allow for there to be a mode of understanding of communal existence, not an individualism that is a byproduct of whiteness and supremacy, that my actions are mine and my religion is a personal venture and it's just me, 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 me. No, man. We need you to unleash your light and luminosity and be a source of barakah that injects blessing into this world that is filled with people who only think about their wants at the expense of their own needs rather than everybody else's needs. Remember who your teacher is, sallallahu alaihi wasallam. So these are people who are willfully choosing to go in one direction other than the other. One version says the Prophet saw a great deal of people gathered around a table spread on which was set grilled meat of the best kind one had ever seen. Near the table, there was some carrion decaying. The people were coming to the carrion to eat from it, and they were leaving the grilled meat untouched. The Prophet asked, "Who are they, O Jibra'il?" He replied, "These are az-zunnat, the adulterers. They make lawful what Allah has made unlawful, and they abandon what Allah has made lawful for them." Then the Prophet went on for a little while. He saw groups of people who had bellies as large as houses, and there were snakes in them which could be seen through their skins. Every time one of those people stood up, he would fall again, and he would say, "O Allah, don't make the hour of judgment rise yet." Then they met the people of Fir'aun on the road, and the latter trampled them underfoot. The Prophet said, "I heard them clamoring to Allah." He asked, "O Jibra'il, who are these?" He replied, "They are those of your community who eat up usury. They cannot stand up except in the manner of those whom the shaitan touches with possession. In usurious-based systems, the rich always win and the poor always get screwed. There's no other way for you to think about this. It is a purposely predatorial-based system to keep poor people poor and shackled in debt, and to have the one that has the wealth and capacity to lend to continue to gain financially. And you have to know why this is something that is prohibited in our religion and not make justifications for it in any which way, shape, or form. Then the Prophet went on for a little while. He saw groups of people whose lips resembled the lips of camels. Their mouths were being pried open and they would be stoned. One version said a rock from Jahannam was placed in their mouths and then it would come out again from their posteriors. The Prophet said, "I heard them clamoring to Allah." He asked, "O Jibra'il, who are these?" He replied, "They're those of your community who eat up the property of orphans and commit injustice. They are eating nothing but a fire for their bellies, and they shall be roasted in it." You know how many children right now don't have parents in Gaza, man? May Allah make it easy. Do you know how many kids there are in the world right now who are orphans? My wife and I are foster parents, and we became foster parents because my wife, she works with children who are survivors of abuse. And some of the kids she was meeting were foster kids who literally, their foster parents would get them in their homes and lock them in rooms and put them in cages and mistreat them and abuse them just so they could collect stipends from the government monthly for checks. This is human capacity. Wealth acquisition is not the problem. The problem is a love for wealth. And how someone can do this to a child. But what does it say about me that I know that it happens? me not doing wrong isn't the same as me doing right. And you want to think about these instances at the level of saying, if this is what's happening to the one that usurps the wealth of the orphan, literally steals the land of our little brothers and sisters, what do you think is going to happen to the ones who uplift them and provide them and support for them? Right? When our prophet says the one who takes care of an orphan is going to be like this with him in Jannah. May Allah make us amongst them. You're not taught that just so that like you know it. You're taught it so that you act on it. Do you know what I mean? And it's not about like shopping for the best option. You know, I do a lot of relief work, alhamdulillah, right? You all know it. I've gone and seen some of these kids face to face in all different parts of the world. Myanmar, Rohingya, Uyghurs, Syrian refugees, Somali refugees, Iraqi refugees, people who were in this earthquake from Turkey and they had crossed the Syrian border already orphaned, and now there were that many more orphans that were there. There's no fundamental way that you can provide livable support to a child for like $5 a month. It's just not possible, regardless of what the exchange rate is. You want to bring thoughtfulness into it. At a high volume, like product prices go down. This is the advantage of working with relief agencies. When I went to Morocco the day after the earthquake hit, and I was with people, and they said, you were here even before our government came here. And I said, my community is with you, man. We asked them what they wanted, and we're going to bring you shelter and this and that. And they said, we don't want just shelter. We want shelter with dignity. They were in these open plains. How? Their homes are brought to rubble. Like, how do they have privacy to go to the bathroom? There's so many people who fundamentally just don't care. It's hard to have a love for people when you have a love for wealth that teaches you that it's okay to usurp the wealth of orphans. I start to just think about where it is that I build presence, so it's a spiritual act and not just mindless. I write a check or I hit a button that then contributes, but there's a human on the other end of this. Like, what is it that they're going to fundamentally really need in order to like get through whatever it is that they're getting through? Do you see what I mean? And then the opportunity for reflection starts me thinking about like my training, my credentials, my skills. There's not a skill set that is in this room that people in the world could not benefit from. And so you don't want to read this and say like, man, I'm just not going to ever like usurp the wealth of an orphan, right? But I want to be the one that does right by the orphan. I want to be the one that like takes care of the orphans. You can build bonds of kinship in our tradition. You get a child into your home, nurse that child before a certain amount of time, and then they have now established a bond of kinship. They're mahram to you, to your children and everybody else. You don't assume their natal identity. This is where like the basis of this is. People would say, that's my son now, that's my daughter. And they would then take their wealth and their estates. And our religion says you cannot assume the natal identity as a fail-safe so that you're not then using that as a basis to say what's theirs is mine. What's theirs is theirs. But you can still provide care. You can still provide assistance. Do you get what I mean? Does that make sense? And the Prophet went on for a little while. He saw women suspended by their chests and others hanging upside down. And the Prophet said, I heard them clamoring to Allah. He asked, who are these, O Jibra'il? And he replied, these are those who commit fornication and then they take the lives of their children. And the Prophet went on for a little while, and he saw groups of people whose sides were being cut off for meat, and they were being devoured. They were being told, eat just as you used to eat the flesh of your brother. The Prophet said, O Jibra'il, who are these? He replied, these are the slanderers of your community who would bring shame to others. And the overall kind of depiction of it, this is where Ashami's edition ends. Then the Prophet continued for a little while, and he found the consumers of usury and of the property of orphans, and the fornicators and adulterers and others in various loathsome states as those that have been described, and even worse. It's given to us in a sense of understanding about like what this religion is. What are these people being held in account for? A lot of it goes down to just like character and ethics, right? Even when we looked at a set of descriptions when we first started reading about Al-Isra wal-Miraj, there was one group that was being described of like not getting up to pray from the comfort of their pillows. All of these others are about like how you treat others, how you engage in just like social interactions, and how your character espouses itself. Do you know what I mean? Because the practice is supposed to be and means to something, not an ends. And you got to like let it be that for you. You have to let it be a religion that is informing as an actual way of existence, a philosophy on life that enables me to find strength in it that cannot be found if you are adopting it as a sociological identity variable. You transition from being a Muslim in name to a Muslim in reality, and a Muslim in reality is not going to like treat people bad. He's not going to engage in practices of infidelity, engage in practices of mistreating orphans and people in need, is not going to engage in practices of like usury that seeks to create that much more stratification in societies. We're not supposed to be a population, man, that is like pro gentrification. We're not supposed to be like people who are happy that like I got this good rent, but it cost like generations of families to get pushed out of their neighborhoods. You're supposed to not eat or drink what you're told to not eat or drink, because you eating and drinking that contributes to occupation and genocide. And it shouldn't be a big deal fundamentally. And if it becomes a big deal, you start to think like, well, what's my heart really attached to, and what gets in the way? And some of it might be like the foundation of it is not rested upon what the inward can be built upon, like foundations rooted in convictions, beliefs, theologies. Do you see? It's rested upon just pillars of practice. And it's one dimension, a critical dimension, but it's not an absolute dimension. Do you know? What are these people examples of? They're examples of people who forgot what was the point of Islam being sent down in the first place. A prophet is sent, a book is sent, because people went down the path of needing now like social ailments and injustices remedied. And they start to move away from it and get drawn into the scope of justifying social ailments and injustices. That's not what like good religion is. Good religion should bring its practitioner to break down social illness and injustices, not contribute to them or be indifferent towards them. And if your practice of religion doesn't bring you to that, we'd say like, well, what's the point of religion, right? Our religion tells us like female infanticide is wrong. Do you know? There's literal verse in the Quran that says to us, like, what are we going to do on this day of judgment when this girl asks for what crime she had committed that she was killed for? But then how do you make sense of things like forced marriages and honor killings and female genital mutilation? Like, how does it make sense? What sunnah are you following? What seerah are you reading? Do you know? What's like the fundamental objective of the religion on a whole? It's not to become a distinguishing variable, us versus them, but it's supposed to inform like my behaviors and my practices. Do you get what I mean? And then there's consequences to it. Like you have access to the information. Like, why is it something I'm not then acting upon in a way that is rendering benefit or at least reducing detriment? It's the basis of Sharia, right? Its implementation is to increase benefit and reduce detriment, not the opposite of that. Do you see? Okay, let's do this for a couple of minutes. I've just been talking a lot. If you turn to the person's next to you, what are you taking away so far from this part of the conversation? What is it bringing up for you? Let's talk for like 5 minutes about that, and then we'll come back and discuss. Go ahead. Somebody left that? Where was it? Okay. Assalamualaikum, how are you? What's your name? Your name is Hadia? No, man. Was she named after you? Okay. Your uncle by marriage is married to her mom. That's what you just said. Okay. So like an in-laws child. That was very difficult. Yeah. Wow. You didn't know you were related? Oh. Do more people in your family have the same name? Twins? No way. MashaAllah. Is this your first time here? Yeah, good. We're happy you're here. Huh? A lot of old people in your masjid? Yeah, well, come by whenever you can. If you need anything ever, let me know, please. Do you think that was enough time for people to talk? You think so? Oh, no way. That's crazy.
I heard somebody from these in.
Yeah, they're yours?
Yeah.
Go for it. Are there a lot of Muslims in St. Thomas? Really? That's so interesting. I went to St. Thomas, and we were trying to find like a masjid and Muslim people and stuff locally. No, there was like some stuff. It was just really far from where we were. We kind of getting, yeah, yeah. That's your cousin, man. What? It's just an entire place that only people. Yeah. We should do once we were trying to plan a retreat, either in the Bahamas or in a place like St. Thomas or something. Yeah. But yeah, people do. Okay. What are we taking away so far? What are we talking about? Yeah. Did you move seats? Oh yeah. Oh man. Yeah, go for it.
One thing that came up, and it really resonates with a theme that you constantly bring up, is community. And I don't know if this like directly answers the question, but everything that the world has created problems, right? And the egocentric thing that you always bring up, right? And it's like, I was just telling, the girl next to me, like every Eid, the khutbah is about healing family ties everywhere you go. Like the khutbah at the age is always like heal family ties. But the systems that we created to solve our problems, like for example, mental health crisis, says cut off your family, don't talk to them, don't do this. But we're told to do the exact opposite. Part of healing is to isolate, and part of healing is to kind of like in the Western world, right? But here, like in AIDS and stuff like that, we're told like, try to heal family ties. Like basically, like it starts with the family and then it turns into the community.
Do you come here for Eid?
No.
No? Why does everybody talk about healing family ties? I know I'm just
I don't come
throwing.
here. I every khutbah, it's like always like.
But why do they do that?
I guess it's important.
Oh yeah.
Because Eid is about spending time with
Man,
family
I've been
and
screwing it
celebrating.
up for a long time. Okay. Yeah, go.
But the idea is that like healing. Okay, your corporate job makes you crazy, gives you anxiety, gives you depression. You see a therapist. The therapist says, okay, well, this, all. Do your own thing, heal yourself. Not realizing that the solution is actually in the people around you, right? Like you can actually connect with people, and not to say that healing is a process and you should seek resources as needed, but it creates a problem. It creates a solution that only makes the problem worse.
The isolation.
The isolation, the cut off your family. Like we're taught that these things are okay. We're taught like, oh, take care of yourself. And not to say that self-care is wrong, but it's just so egocentric. And it's actually a result of a problem that was created systemically. Like why are you stressed out? My job's stressing you out. Why is your job stressing you out? And then Islam basically comes in and says like, okay, well, I'm teaching you the natural way, like we're communities, we're families, we're this, we have to be, support each other, create, basically be a good Muslim, smile in your brethren's face, basic stuff that's supposed to create that trust and that love in the community. And yet, like, I feel like Islam is the solution, and yet because systems created
problems, they try to solve it in an un-Islamic way, that it just worsens the problem. That's what I'm getting at.
Yeah, I mean, I don't remember the psychiatrist's name, but there's a guy in Vietnam who was working in a rice paddy, and there was a mine from the Vietnam War that was still in the rice field that he was working in, and it triggered, and it essentially blew off both of his legs. And the psychiatrist was visiting this village, and he was talking to the residents of the village. They're villagers, not like kind of a city the way we live in a city, but if you were to think stereotypically of what a village would look like in a place like this, likely the image you're conjuring is probably what it is. And this guy has prosthetics. And so if you know anything about kind of prosthetics, large part, like wood based for someone that's coming where he's coming from, rice paddies are submerged in water. It's not going to be good for the prosthetic, let alone he's got to like go back to the rice field where a bomb blew up and it took his legs. It's very traumatic and triggering. And so this psychiatrist is talking to the villagers in relation to some of this about antidepressants and what it is. And then the villagers say like, oh yeah, we like gave him an antidepressant. And he doesn't understand how they have in this remote village antidepressants. And so they said, we'll show you. And they took the psychiatrist to a cow and they said, this is the antidepressant. But essentially, what they did as a community was pool their money together and bought the cow for this man so that he didn't have to get his prosthetics damaged in the submerged rice fields or go back to the place that was going to be traumatic for him while still giving him a source of income so he could feed his family, right? And they're like, that's what it is, right? And it's not about knocking medications and stuff. That's not what the point is. But at a communal level, even if you read like psychological studies where they're looking at like, people that came back from war and they're getting addicted to like heroin and cocaine and other drugs, and they utilize like mice, right? They build something called Rat Park and they're infusing water with hard drugs. The mice that go towards the hard drugs are the ones that are alone. And when they're together, they're not even paying attention to that water. They don't even need it. You see? And that's why like it's so important to understand that a lot of people turn away from religion because of religious people. And it becomes problematic when there's not accountability mechanisms or there's not like a sense of like how do you embody at a communal level or teach like these hadith that are not anomalies, but they make up a good chunk of our tradition that say things like smiling is a sadaqah, do you know? And you really instill that in your own personal ethos. Do you see what I mean? That then the benefit is also derived back to you because you're going to gain from also smiling at somebody. Do you know? And it's not that there's not like challenge or sadness, but contentment coexists with these things. So the Prophet was known as the smiling one, alayhi salam, but he also like cried a lot. Do you know? And neither of these are extremes. They're like the balanced middle way. Do you see? And it starts with like groups that are here. Why I have you talk to each other is that you actually talk to each other and you learn each other's names. So when you're praying together, you know who you're praying with. And you start to exchange ideas. And then you're bold enough to say, like, hey, let's go eat dinner together after the halakha. Like, you check in and you start to learn about what people are going through fundamentally. And then part of a self-care strategy is like I lean on my community, and I go to spaces that I know are good for my heart. And I don't like make excuses, do you know? It's like when Ramadan comes, they're going to be the floodgates, right? Arrogance is very subtle. Allah protect us from it. You all are here right now on a Wednesday night, right? You have a responsibility to being the ones who welcome in the people who will come on a Wednesday in Ramadan who've never been here before. And after they meet you, Like, why will they want to keep coming back again?
Because we're cool.
But how would they know that, right? And if you only sit with your friends and your people and you're only talking to the people you get along with, a lot of you had nobody when you came here and you found people. And it wasn't so that you just stuck with them and pretended like nobody else is coming and sitting around you. It's a different way of having a myopic perspective. I'm not saying you gotta like be everybody's best friend, but you be somebody's sister or brother. And then you think about that like at a communal level, right? You embody those types of prophetic traits that isn't like, I got to be the one giving the dars, so I got to be the one leading the prayer. Our model of community engagement has multiple entry points to it. Most religious communities in many spaces have singularized entry points, and quite often, religious communities, the primary interjection point is like religious leadership. Do you know? Pre-COVID, we were adding in like different entry points every year: converts group, a Latino group, a Black Muslim initiative, a women's initiative. We were laying the foundation for an artist collective. COVID kind of got in the way of some of that. But the idea was to meet people where they're at and not just have this rigid archetype of everybody just fits into whatever. And we see some of this translating into some of our other programs, right? Like, you know, a bake off on the weekend. Dr. Rania Awad comes to speak. Nuruddin Knight comes to speak. We have like these social events, community service events, like halakas. There's a lot of people that come here. They're going to have diverse needs. All of you are not the same, but just being in each other's presence can also be a healing variable, right? And when you understand our tradition, Shaitan, like predatorially, in the illustration, "Kullukum ra'in," that all of you are shepherds and all of you are responsible for your sheep, the hadith says, like we play a dual role. We're both shepherds and sheep. But in that situation, I can oscillate between being a follower and a leader. And like that's what we want to build. We want a community that builds not just solid leaders, but builds solid followers also. Do you know? But as much as you're going to be a shepherd and you're going to be a sheep, you never want to be the wolf, right? And who does the wolf attack? Not the ones that are in community together, but the one that's like all by themselves. They're going to go after like the singular sheep. Do you see? Don't make somebody like go graze by themselves. When you love for someone what you love for yourself, like you welcome them in, you like sit with them, right? And these are kind of things you want to ideate around. There's going to be a month from now iftar happening this day of the week. May Allah bless us to reach Ramadan and take benefit from it. All these people are going to come. You know they're going to come, right? So you're here. This is your space in your community. Like, what are you going to do so that you're the one that's smiling at them when they come? You know what I mean? You can't smile at somebody if your back is turned towards them, right? You can't smile at somebody if like you're just focused on everything that has to do only with you. Do you know? And we take care of all the other stuff. You're gonna get a plate of food. Do you know what I mean? Somebody else is gonna be vacuuming the floor you're praying on. All you gotta do is like embody some of these things, and the benefit's gonna come back to your heart more than anybody else. Do you see? Does that make sense? What else did we talk about? Sorry, I know I talk a lot. Yeah.
I guess one thing we
Thanks,
talked
Al.
about was all we talked about like all the wrongs that the people are on the hellfire for, or the wrongs that you see in the relief work, people doing mutilation or domestic abuse. And if you take a look from their perspective, all these people, when they're doing this wrong, they all think they're right. Like in that moment, they all think that they're not the villain of the story. So we were thinking about, why does somebody who does what's clearly wrong think they're right in that moment? And sort of put that down to what the sister was saying, like their belief system, like what they had, what has built up in them over time, the normalization of arrogance or ignorance. And so I think the importance of like attending these kind of gatherings or self-healing so that you don't commit wrong unknowingly.
Yeah. And characteristics are contagious, but you don't need someone's permission to adopt their character, right? المرء على دين خليله فلينظر أحدكم من يخالل. That an individual is on the way of their friends, so be mindful of who you befriend. So if you're surrounded by people who like that's just what their kind of worldview is, you're gonna soon start to become like them, right? And it's just gonna happen organically and unconsciously, you know? Versus like, well, where do I really want to take stuff from and who do I want to be around and kind of be in their presence? Do you know what I mean? I like good people, like nice people. You know what I'm saying? And it takes a little bit of light to push away darkness. So if the crux of your day is spent in like overtly capitalistic settings that are rooted in unhealthy manifestations of this intentioned with greed, then like spend like 20 minutes with somebody that you know isn't doing that to create some balance, right? Your heart deserves it. It's like, well, like what do I really have to do? Like, yeah, it'll exert effort. You got to get on the train and come in the cold weather and like do stuff. Do you know? You got to like think out ideas on how you kind of engage people and what can kind of be helpful. Do you know what I mean? Right? But thinking about that in ways that are empowering and like doing it with love so that you implement it and then people continue to benefit from it, and it creates like norms and customs that generations will keep building upon after your time that's here, right? And if you got to think about it selfishly, you introduce something that's of a benefit every time someone gains from it or acts on it. That's like a sadaqah jariyah for you. Like that's just what it is. Do you know? So you establish that as a practice, like that's a nice thing. It's not like a not nice thing. You see what I mean? Okay. The next section that is here just has the prophet meeting like different prophets at every level of the heavens, and we'll kind of go through that really quickly next time, and then we'll get us to a place where he starts to like engage the Prophet Musa alayhi salam. This is before the Prophet speaks to Allah. You know, is given like 5 daily prayers as a mandate from 50 to 5. It'll be getting us closer like to the end part of this. So we'll go through some of those things next time, inshallah. So I wanted to take 2 minutes. I did this on Monday at my halaqah also. How many here were on Monday? Great. Yeah. So I know people had a lot of questions, even when I was coming in today. I had a lot of people asking me, like, "Are you leaving forever? Am I never going to see you again?" I was like, I don't think that's the case, inshallah. I don't have like full clarity on what my immediate next steps are. As information like comes, I'm going to share it with everybody. There's definitely opportunities and projects that I'm hoping to be a part of in some ways here locally that will benefit our community. The impetus for me is not something that came up just in the last month or the last set of months randomly, but something that I've been pondering upon for a few years now, right? In terms of my own individual capacities, like the kind of things Allah has blessed me with in terms of gifts and platforms, and what can enable me to grow for our community as best as possible while I still have energy and strength and time to do that. I think where I've landed is my capacity to build, like in particular here, has probably hit a ceiling. But moving out from here elsewhere can enable me to continue to grow and build with all of you for the sake of our community. What that's going to end up looking like over the coming months into the coming year or two will likely have different manifestations. New projects that we're working on that are multi-million-dollar ventures are not going to in the immediate have opportunity for hiring structures that would enable me to say like this is just where I'm going to be, because there's a lot of other stuff that has to be done in terms of renovations and constructions and all these other kinds of things. So as I get more insight, I will let you all know. but I hope you trust me enough to be able to understand that the motivations here are not just for me individually, but for all of us. I would also ask you to just be mindful. Uh, I sent this out because I needed to, because without announcing it, I can't really explore what it is that happens next. And I didn't want to explore without notifying the people I love, which is all of you, so that somebody else didn't come and say to you, do you know what he's doing right now? I wanted you to hear it from me. And in that vein, like recognizing at least the responses that came to me directly, which were many, alhamdulillah, and I've been working through a lot of them. You might have gotten a response from me already if you sent me something, but there was definitely a lot of people who replied back to me in different ways. People have varied responses. And you just want to be mindful of how it is that you're talking about some of these things as there's transitions, especially if there's not information that is solidified. I haven't told anybody anything in specific because I don't even know myself. And I said this on Monday to people, and I'll repeat it here. Like, if you know something that's going to happen in my life that I don't know, please tell me so that I know what it is that I'm going to be doing in the coming months. But inshallah, like, good things will come from this. And we want to think with that mindset, right? There's a lot of variables that are undefined. But when I started working here, it was also in pursuit of things that didn't really happen elsewhere. And I think with good intentions, with good people, like Allah facilitates. And that's all we have to do. We just put our trust in the divine. We utilize the means that he provides for us. And then we try to build to the best of our ability what we can for nothing other than the pursuit of what is going to be pleasing to him. So I'm hopeful in the coming weeks, like I'll have more information for people in different ways. My role here will be fully transitioned out by the end of the summer, like August, which is like months away, right? And Allah knows best. A lot of different things can happen between now and August. And I don't say that to be morbid. I say it as a reality. Like every day I get up with an energy because I don't know like if that's going to be the last one. But the intention that I have is to stay in this particular capacity through the end of the summer. And then thereafter, I'll hopefully have something that I'm going to be able to like feed my kids with and my wife and provide for my home, right? Alhamdulillah. Otherwise, we might be sleeping in one of your houses. But I'll keep people in the loop and updated on things as they go on. And just, if you can wait to hear from me on it rather than allow for thoughts and conjectures to build into conversations that fundamentally are rooted in what exactly I don't know, that you don't know like who might be like hearing or reading or listening to what you're saying, and they're processing it a little bit differently than what the intention might be. Do you get what I mean? Does that make sense? Yeah. Okay. So why don't we take a pause here for today? We'll resume back with this next Wednesday. A lot of us pray to Isha before. Is anybody going to make Isha right now but didn't pray? Yeah. So these guys, if anybody wants to pray Isha, you can make a Jama'ah in like maybe 10 minutes. People make wudu. So at 9 o'clock, you can call the Iqamah. We'll see everybody next Wednesday, inshallah. Yeah. Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullah.
But they're like walking. Yeah. We're just kind of sitting. I think that was kind of just like, we're gonna have to get two. Yeah, no, we might.
Assalamualaikum. How are you? Yeah, it is still. Raheem, can you turn that off?
How are you?